underdog. I've been through it all.
What's good, you guys? Welcome to another segment of For the Underdogs podcast. I'm out here in Miami, Florida at the Next Chapter U event with the PAC team, and I got one of the special PAC members here, Jake McKenzie. I'm super excited to talk about. Jake is super passionate about the growth of people and human performance and all things around just getting better. So we got a chance to connect a couple weeks ago, and I think it's only right that he blessed us with some of his knowledge on the podcast. So welcome.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about how you came into the world of PAC and your passion behind people, because I do feel that synergy when I speak to you is you definitely care about people, you care about the guys, and I just want to get a little bit about that story.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, yeah, we continue where we started, and I think anyone who knows me knows where I come from. So I feel like that's probably always the best place to start, you know.
Yeah.
Born from interesting circumstances, you know, a single mother, battling drug addiction. I don't know my father. He was not around when I was born. Spent time in the foster care system, you name it. So I think like those origins are a huge part of my story. It's important to know that I went through some struggle early in my life, and that's really where my passion and my purpose for helping other people was born from. So, you know, I mean, ultimately adopted by my grandmother, a beautiful spirit. She gave me the things that I really needed, the space to learn, to grow, you know, a house to sleep in. And
that's cool.
I would say that's the seed that then grew into the man that I've become today. And ultimately what led me to PAC. You know?
What is that like from a adult standpoint? You mentioned not knowing who your father was and having a mother who was, you know, had an addiction issue. What is that like from being an adult? Obviously, you probably had to battle with some of those demons as well, just given these are the people who birthed you, you know? Man. Like, what does that feel like? And can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, there's no hiding that it's been a process, you know?
Yeah.
When I was young, there was definitely shame, you know, shame that I probably didn't fully understand. You look around and you see your boys and, you know, they got mom and dad and you know, that white picket fence lifestyle. And you kind of have your skeletons in the closet that you don't really want to talk about. And there's definitely a strong sense of comparison that can live there. And as I grew up and, you know, became more aware of the world, what I realized was that I was blessed, man, with my circumstances, right? Like, we're all dealt cards, and what really matters is how do we play those cards, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's cliche, but it's cliche for a reason.
Yeah.
You know, things like that have stood the test of time. And it's because there's wisdom in that. And so, you know, there was a time in my life where, like I said, I hid those things. And what I realized was, you know, my father was a man who decided to disappear before I was born. And do I want that man influencing me and leading me and who I am to become in this world? And along the way, I had this opportunity where I could surround myself with amazing individuals with elite qualities and characteristics and grab onto those things, right? My coaches in the locker room, some of my mentors, my close friends, and they would offer me wisdom, and I got the opportunity to say, is this the wisdom that I want to grab onto and continue to make it my own so that I can determine the man that I'm becoming in this world? And that's really become a really important part of my story, specifically as I become a father.
Yeah.
And that's a battle every day, right? Like it sounds nice.
Yeah.
But the reality is there's this dialogue that I work through on a daily basis.
I was going to ask you, for me, it's a daily decision you have to make. When you've gone through things and you have been affected or traumatized by certain things, I feel like it's easier to fall into that cycle because it is a cycle and it's evident that it's there. What does that daily decision look like for you, though? How do you start your day putting Jake first in whatever you're about to do? What does that look like?
Yeah. You know, this is a process I think you learn over time, right? You try stuff. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. You read something online, you're like, I'm going to try that. Yeah. And then eventually you learn what your process looks like. And so what I've learned is and this language may not be for everybody, but there's a degree of selfishness that's required.
Absolutely.
For you to show up and be who you want to be every day. And that doesn't mean that you're putting yourself before everyone else, but it means that you know what's required from you on a daily basis, what the inputs are, what that routine looks like, and you commit to that. And that's where you get to show up then, and the cup is full, right? And then you get to go ahead and share that with other people. And so, man, I try to start my day doing challenging things.
Yeah.
That's become really important to me. I think growing up as an athlete, right, the first thing you typically did every day is you walked into that weight room with the guys, with that coach barking at you, telling you to get after it. That weight looking you in the face like, are we really about to do this again?
Yeah, for sure.
But I think when you choose challenging things, right, in your day, and then when you don't have the choice and that challenge shows up on your doorstep, you go, oh, man, we're good.
For sure.
I already chose this today.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming.
Yeah,
right?
I would much rather choose the challenging way as opposed to the path of least resistance. I found that post-career for me, I had to start challenging myself within finding who I was, because if I didn't, then what am I really doing at the end of the day? There were times where I started challenging myself with breath work and cold plunge and like things that allow me to take control of my mind, because my mind's going to tell me you don't need to be doing this or get out of that water. It's too cold. Like, no, right. I control that portion, so that's been something that's big for me, is challenging myself. Talk to me a little bit about, you had a chance to send me the growth series that you've been working on a couple weeks ago, and I read through a couple of them, and I think they're really powerful. Talk to me about that a little bit and tell me where that originated from and your passion behind it. I really want to get into your mind on that.
Yeah, man. So, I kind of touched on it, some of those unique life experiences. And as I've navigated those life experiences, I feel like I've been collecting wisdom along the way, right? And not all of it's mine. Some of it's borrowed, right? Some of it is extracted from other human beings. And as I've navigated that, I've started to realize that there are some common threads through life between all of us that I think are important for us to learn about, because to your point, when you're faced with the daily decision of who you're going to be, right, you can tap back into that wisdom. And so, long story short, what I did was at the beginning of this year, I set a goal for myself to start sharing some of those learnings, right, really owning my story and making sure that I was taking on the social responsibility and exercising my creative and my inner leader and sharing that with other people. So I launched the Growth Series. I'm putting out one article every month, and that article is highlighting some of that wisdom that I've either learned from my own life experiences, read from a book, and then tried on, and ultimately like where I failed. Just to call it, like, it's where failure has happened.
That's what it's about.
Man. So, the failure is the starting point for me in most circumstances. You fail, and that's just your first attempt in learning, right? And so as I've gone through life, I've failed, I've learned what I do and do not love. I've been able to capture some things that I would call like impactful moments in my life. And so I'm sharing about that through the Growth Series with anyone who's willing to read and tap in and wants to gain some of that wisdom.
Yeah, that's powerful. You spoke a little bit about your inner leader, and I know you guys did the session on internal dialogue this morning. That was something that I battled with during my career, even post-career. I want to get your impression on internal dialogue. Like, if someone is dealing with that internal critic that's beating them up constantly, what advice would you give to them? How would you go about, creating this balance between some of it? For me, I would say mine was fear-based, but I used fear to propel me within the NFL and my careers and all the things that I got into post-career. And it served me well until it didn't. Right. Like when you have something to put forward and work towards, you can use it as fuel. But when it's not helpful, then it can really beat you down. So what advice would you give to someone that has that internal critic? Yeah,
great question, man. And this is why I love talking to guys like you, because it's important to have this conversation. And I think normalizing this conversation around inner dialogue,
absolutely,
I think that's the starting point.
For sure.
Right? So finding like-minded human beings who are willing to actually have this conversation and be vulnerable about it, right? Normalizing it. So I think you start there, and then I think you start to generate an awareness around, what are these voices that I'm hearing inside of my head? What roles and responsibilities are they taking over me?
Facts.
Right? And I think that's where we regain our power. And so in these voices, we call it the internal dialogue. And the reality is these things show up when you're pursuing something great, right? When you're being challenged in life. They're not showing up when you're coasting. Yeah, right. The internal critic, which is one of the primary voices in that dialogue, it likes it when you're taking it easy.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, this is comfortable. Because if you change, I have to change.
Yeah.
And the critic doesn't want to change, man.
That's real.
They like the easiness of where you are. And so I think it's one acknowledging, like, when that voice comes to you, that dialogue starts, it's because, man, growth's knocking on your door.
Facts.
Right? And one of my favorite things about this, and, you know, I don't even know where this originated from, but that person knocking on your door, like, they're here to, that's a thief, bro. They're here to rob you. And thieves do not rob empty houses. So to your point, right, this drove you to be an elite human being in the NFL and now an elite human being beyond the NFL.
Yeah.
Because being a football player, it does not define you, right? And so when that door, when someone starts knocking, that dialogue, you get to choose which one you're going to listen to. And,
absolutely.
And what you said is really important is fear, right? Like, fear is present in all of us, man. And the truth about fear is it can stop you, shrink you, prevent you from growing, right? Yeah. Or it can motivate you to go forward. And I think the voices can sometimes become a bit interchangeable. Yeah. The energy around them, and then the action that they influence that you take next, that determines which one you're listening to. Ooh. So fear is our friend until we decide that it's the reason we stop doing what we know we should be doing.
Man. That's a great bit right there. I love what you said, especially about thieves don't come to rob empty houses. Like, there's something in there that internal critic wants, and you gotta face that, you know. So tell me a little bit about what PAC has meant to you and what it's done for you. I spoke to DK just a little bit ago on PAC, and I think how unique it is to have guys in this setting. But I would like to hear it from your standpoint. What has PAC done for you, and what does it mean to you?
Yeah. I mean, PAC's changed my life. Yeah, it really has. I grew up in unique circumstances, as I mentioned, and when I found athletics, specifically football, it was the first time in my life that I felt like I had gained the ability to have influence over who I was becoming. Structure, the right coaches, the right teammates, goal-driven mentality, get better every day. There was something about that was already in me. Yeah. And sport gave me the permission to tap into that. And, you know, like all of us, I had ambitions to be a pro athlete, but for many reasons that did not happen, you know, some of which were under my control and some of which is, you know, just being 5'8", you know, genetics.
Shit happens.
Yeah, man. So, you know, to make a long story short, some of my closest friends got involved with PAC. We saw this need, right, where the athlete, when they transition out of the game, there's a narrative that exists right now that it's a struggle, you know, that athletes are not capable. And, you know, I mean, the reality, I mean, excuse my language, it's bullshit. It
is.
Yeah, it's not true, man. No. You got this audience of elite human beings. Man. They've climbed a mountain that so few have climbed, full of skill sets that are being craved by people everywhere in the world, Absolutely. Right? And so when they gave me the premise of what PAC was and why it exists, and that I could come and serve these guys transitioning from professional sports into the next chapter of their life as a performance coach, it was a no-brainer. Yeah. So I jumped in when PAC started. You know, I've been with PAC as a performance coach since day one. Yeah. I remember our very first combine. I think we had 21 guys there in Fort Lauderdale.
Now we're in the hundreds.
Yeah, I mean, you were in Scottsdale, man. We had 200 guys, professional athletes in that room. Yeah. And I mean, you add the business leaders, the educators. I'm like somewhere north of 350 human beings who want to fuel that mission of redefining the legacy of an athlete when they leave their sport.
Absolutely.
And so for me, what's been wonderful, man, is it's forced me to walk the walk. Right, I sit with these guys and talk to them about
hold you accountable.
Yeah, man, I mean, we talk about leveling up, about believing in your inner champion, your inner greatness. Yeah, and then I found myself sitting on the fence of a career that I was no longer inspired by, becoming a father. My son watching me, and I know even if I'm not saying it, I know he knows how I feel inside.
100%.
And so PAC's been this amazing place, man, where I'm walking in a room amongst giants, and I feel inspired every single day. Not just with what we're doing and the impact we're creating, but individuals like yourself that I get to interact with on a daily basis.
For sure.
And it has literally been jet fuel to me.
Man.
And I get to walk in my home at the end of the day and look my wife in the face and know that I'm being honest and being the best man that I can be, and that I'm setting a positive example for my son and my soon-to-be son, because my wife is 6 months pregnant.
Congratulations.
And we got another baby boy coming. So it's taken, that we talked about the inner critic.
Yeah.
The inner critic loves to talk to you when you've set a goal and you're advertising that to the world and you're bullshitting everybody. Like people are like, oh, why is that feeling coming up?
That
like,
imposter.
because you're not being honest with yourself. And I wasn't being honest with myself for a while. And PAC has inspired that level of honesty. Yeah. And it doesn't make me great, perfect, any of that. I'm still making mistakes every single day.
For sure.
But what I know is that I'm doing it in the right room with the right people and serving the right purpose. And, you know, our CEO, he talks about this Japanese concept called ikigai. You ever heard of that before?
I heard of it, but remind us what it's about.
It's this idea that when you find yourself at the intersection of what the world needs, your purpose, what you can get paid for, and what you're great at. And for me, that's been PAC. Yeah.
That's powerful right there. I love that. I appreciate you stopping by. I want to ask you one more question before we leave, but before I get to that, you had spoke on the narrative around guys transitioning out of the league. And I just want to touch on that a little bit. Like for me, I went through that phase as well. And what I've noticed is when I reflect on it, the traits that made me who I was in that top 1% of guys that can play in the NFL are the same traits I have to apply to the next thing. It may look different. It may feel different because I'm not putting a helmet on, shoulder pads. I'm not hitting anybody, blocking anybody. But I have those traits and they're instilled in me or else I wouldn't have made it to that level. So I think a lot of guys have to trust themselves and lean into what made you, like, give yourself the credit that you deserve. Lean into those things that made you who you are and apply it to the next chapter because it'll serve you well. The last question I wanted to ask you is, when it comes in terms of growth, we talked about the growth series, what's the best piece of advice you could give for someone who's looking to start their growth journey or someone who's in that phase, they feel like they're growing and they take a step back and it's eating them up? Give me something that you would tell that person.
Yeah. I think it's really important to first acknowledge the broader context that you were just on top of the mountain and there's a chance that now you're at the bottom of it, right? But if you reflect back, you started there last time too.
Facts.
Right? And you learned all the skills you needed to learn to climb that mountain.
Yeah.
So it wasn't necessarily your ability to learn the skills that made you great, but it was the character, the substance of who you were as a human being to be willing to put the work in over and over and over again and to fail multiple times until you became successful, right?
Yeah.
And so what I would share is embrace failure. That's okay.
It's part of it.
Right? I think that there can sometimes be a narrative that because I was great here, I must immediately be great here. And that's just not the truth, man.
There's a process
right?
to it.
Like whether it's a mountain, a wave, whatever metaphor you want to use, but life, it ebbs and it flows. So starting over, humbling yourself, reminding yourself though of that inner champion, right? That guy who started probably when he was 8 years old with a dream and brought forth character every single day, put the work in to become the best at what your job or assignment was.
For sure.
And to move with more faith than fear in where you're going.
Yeah.
That's powerful, man. And if you're not willing to give yourself that credit and move forward every day, inch forward every single day, right? Even when you're failing, then it's probably going to be a challenge.
Right.
And a challenge in the sense that maybe you don't end up where you want to be.
Yeah.
But the reality is that athletes transitioning out of the game have everything that they need. Everything. Every single thing. They just need to be willing to fail again, to be a beginner again, and to be willing to get after it and be relentless in getting back to the top of that mountain, right?
Yeah.
Because they're capable of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they've proven that.
Yeah.
Over and over again.
That's facts.
Yeah.
That's real, man. I appreciate you stopping by. This conversation was great. Obviously, we connected a couple weeks ago, talked over, the platform and everything, and I just knew right away we needed to talk. So I appreciate you. I love what you're doing. Keep doing your thing with the Growth Series. It's been dope to watch.
Yeah, man. Feelings mutual. Appreciate you sharing the space.
Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, for the underdogs, I'm an underdog. I've been through it all.